So I'm Rob Hopkins. I'm one of the co-founders of the transition movement, and I am also, as you will find out, somebody who plays with time in some very interesting ways. And so I'm going to just start by setting the context of what it is. Do come in and have a seat. So to start by setting the context of why it is that I do what I do before I tell you what I do. So the thing with climate change is it's complex, but not really very complicated. And climate science basics make this really straightforward. There are 5 basics. Number 1, it's warming. Anyone who traveled here through London a couple of days ago will attest to that. It was 46 degrees in Spain the other day. The world is on a warming trend, and it's accelerating. Number 2, it's us. It's not part of a natural cycle. It's not a hoax by the Chinese. It's us and our love of burning things, mostly forests and fossil fuels. Oops. Number 3, we're sure. There is no credible debate anymore among people who actually know what they're talking about, that that's what's happening. Number 4, it's bad, and it's going to get an awful lot worse unless we do something about it. But number 5, we can do something about this. We are not passive in the face of this as it unfolds. So in case there are people who are who you work with or in your family who say, oh, well, it's fine, it means in the UK we'll be able to grow better wine or something like that. If the world, I was recently at an event in France where someone from the French government said that the president of France had commissioned a study into how France could adapt to a world that had warmed by 4 degrees. Can you imagine? I said, I can save him an awful lot of time and an awful lot of money. There is absolutely no hope in hell that France could adapt to a 4-degree world. That is not going to happen. And if you need one image, I always say to people, if you're not regularly terrified about climate change, you're not paying attention. If the world was to warm by 3 degrees, these places in the darkest color here are places where it's going to be over 35 degrees for more than 150 days a year. Just look at that and breathe that in. That's where we're headed on a business as usual scenario. And we have left this so late, we have faffed about and procrastinated that what would have been quite an easy thing to do starting in the year 2000, something like that, the year 2005, when we started the transition movement. If governments and business had listened and taken that path, it was quite easy. Now this is a really, really sharp challenge. We've never done something like this before. I spoke a while ago to Peter Kalmus, an amazing climate scientist who is so passionate about the climate science that he has been arrested twice. He chained himself to the Chase Bank, shut down a private airport for private jets. And I said to him, you know, we talk a lot about the best case scenarios. What's the worst case scenarios? What's the best case scenario? He said, well, it's what I call emergency mode. We go into emergency mode where we scale out fossil fuels and we phase out industrial meat production very quickly. Then we could still stay below 2 degrees and do other things. I said, that's brilliant, Peter, but emergency mode is a rubbish name for it. No one's going to go, yeah, great, let's do emergency mode. So this session is really about how else might we do that? How else? Because we have to do this. This is not a session, I'm not here today to negotiate with physics. This is a session about how would we do that and how would we talk about that so that we don't call it emergency mode, but we come up with a different way of thinking about it. The Institute for the Future in Palo Alto have this beautiful saying on their windows. It says, any useful statement about the future should at first seem ridiculous. I'm a great believer in the ridiculous. I spoke a while ago at a conference in Switzerland, 400 young people, all really passionate about organic food and regenerative farming. And the guy who spoke before me was from the 4th biggest supermarket in Switzerland. And 4 times in his talk, and I counted, he said, and I urge you to be pragmatic. And when it was my turn to speak, I said, please don't be pragmatic. The last thing the world needs now is another generation of pragmatic people. Be bold, be audacious, be playful, be ridiculous, because that's really what this challenge demands of us. And so, are you on the same one as I am? Oh, that's the one. Okay. So, for me, the big question is, what do our movements for change in this historic moment where we have to change direction so profoundly, what do they look like if rather than just talking about collapse and extinction and big signs that say we're fucked on them, instead was about creating longing, generating longing for this world that we have to build instead. And my favorite way of talking about what that looks like is by talking about the moon. So in 1865, Jules Verne wrote a book called From the Earth to the Moon. Maybe some of you have read it. And he pulled together all the best science and engineering he could find at the time about how you might actually get to the moon. And he wrote it in a thrilling, thrilling story. Some of it was incredibly historically prescient, like his rocket was built of aluminium, it had 3 astronauts, it took off in Florida, loads of people came to watch the launch. Some of it not quite so accurate in his book. It got into space by being fired out of an enormous cannon, which we now know if you actually did that, the astronauts would be turned to jam the moment you pressed the button. But what happened was his book inspired generations of engineers and scientists to then try and figure out how might we actually do this. The first feature film that was made in 1902, Georges Méliès, A Trip to the Moon, was about that. Then you had this whole genre of popular science magazines in the 30s, 40s, 50s that were all about what will we eat on the moon? Where will we stay on the moon? How will we play football on the moon? All the important questions, you know. And you had Mickey Mouse went to the moon, Popeye went to the moon. By the time, everybody was going to the moon, even my clicker doesn't seem to work very well. In the 1950s, there was a whole genre of absolutely rubbish films. There were 10 of them, and one of them was called Cat Women of the Moon. I have watched this so that you don't have to. And I can tell you it's the most rubbish thing you've ever seen. It says, oops, see the lost city of love-starved cat women. The idea was, in all these 10 films, the idea was that all male crews of astronauts went to the moon and arrived there to find it populated entirely by women who hadn't seen men for ages. Very weird sort of male fantasy, which then I don't quite get why the men at the bottom look so absolutely terrified. Once they've actually got there. It says you've never seen anything like it. Absolutely. But the point was that in our culture then we were rehearsing and rehearsing and rehearsing. It got into the culture, whether it was in rubbishy films like this, whether it was in Tintin, when Tintin went to the moon, everybody went to the moon. There were jazz dances about how you might walk on the moon. You know, it got into the culture. So it meant that in 1962, when JFK announced we will go to the moon, standing in front of a man trying very hard not to sneeze, it meant that actually we did that within 6 years. And when Neil Armstrong actually set foot on the moon, the New York Times published a cartoon by Hergé, who drew the Tintin comics, which, this is not really doing me any favors, this thing. Yeah, which showed that he arrived there to be greeted by Tintin and his friends saying, "Welcome to the moon, Mr. Armstrong." Because we had been there so many times. So for me, the same thing applies to the climate emergency. We don't have 100 years to figure this out like we did with the moon. But the same principle applies, that the longing comes first. The storytelling comes first. We have to talk about what that journey would be like in a way that is so delicious and so enticing that we fall in love with the possibilities and it becomes our new North Star of where we want to go. So I have traveled here. I wonder if it might be possible one of the gentlemen backstage might be able to bring me the other one of these, because this doesn't really work very well. I've traveled up here from the town of Totnes in South Devon. You may know many things about Totnes. It's where the first the first vegetable box scheme started. Our poet laureate in Totnes always says if you live in Totnes for too long, your body starts to secrete a new hormone called totnesterone that brings your masculine and feminine into perfect alignment with each other. But it's also the place where we have been developing the world's first, thank you so much, beautiful, superstar, where we've been developing the world's first actual time travel program. Ooh, thank you. You're very kind, thank you. And yeah, if I don't win the Nobel Prize this year, I'm going to be very much put out. And this is my colleague, Mr. Kit, and we regularly take journeys into the future using this time machine. We don't travel to like 2300 or something like that. We travel to 2030. And I'll tell you why. Because 2030 is the time, according to the Paris Agreement, when we need to have cut our emissions by 48%. And that's just 5 years out, right? So we have so many stories in our culture that say, oh, that's impossible, that's never going to happen. Well, what if it was possible? What if we did get there? And it wasn't the finished article. It wasn't perfect. It certainly wasn't a utopia. It certainly wasn't a dystopia either. It was a 2030 that resulted from us doing absolutely everything we could possibly do. It still looked largely the same, but you can see the direction has changed. So Mr. Kit and myself, this one isn't great either. Should I be pointing it that way? Okay. So this Mr. Kit and myself, we regularly travel there, and we go there to make recordings and bring back things to show you what that world is like and how it turned out. And that's what I want to be doing with you today. So just in case there might happen, oh, I've gone the wrong way now. In case any of you here are still thinking, Rob, I don't actually believe that you have built a time machine. I don't actually believe time travel is possible. Well, I have evidence for you, my friends, which is that recently a friend of mine was in our kitchen and was filming. This is my wife, Emma, in the kitchen. And if you look very closely, you will see me setting off on one of my adventures into 2030. This is some serious quantum shit, really. It would take me a long time to explain, but it's very, very powerful. And what I want to do today with you all is the first act of actual time travel in the history of Groundswell Festival. Ooh, ooh. Thank you very much. So in order to do this, there's a couple of things. I need you to make a pair with somebody, ideally, who you didn't know when you arrived here. So we might just take a minute for you all to you might need to turn around or change seats, try and find a partner. Okay, thank you. Thank you very much. Has everybody got a partner? Okay, so you might be thinking, why has he asked us, hello, welcome. Might be thinking, why has he asked us to get in a pair with someone we didn't know? Well, I've done this many, many years now, and so far I've had 5 couples come up to me and say, you know that thing you do with the, that's how we met, and 1 baby. So be careful. So the reason I think it's important is that, we spent 2 years in our houses not seeing anyone. We live in an epidemic of loneliness. Even if this turns out to be the worst talk you've ever been to, you're going to know someone you didn't know before you came, and I think that's really important. Yeah, thank you. So this is my time machine. We're going to see if my sync with the guys backstage works really, really well, because I'm going to turn on my time machine now. This is, honestly, if I don't win the Nobel Prize, I'm going to be really put out. Okay, so what we're going to do, I'm going to ask you if you might close your eyes, please, and to feel the ground underneath your feet. And I need to just teach you the sound a time machine makes. This is very important, which is that I do this and you join in, okay? Groundswell, that is useless. There's no way we're going to break the time barrier with that. One more time. Beautiful, thank you. Okay, so in a moment, we're going to turn this time machine on. I'm just setting the controls here for 2030. And we're going to go there, and we're just going to spend a couple of minutes in silence. And I'd love you to imagine that you are stepping out into that world and taking a walk around. But use all of your senses. What does that 2030 that you long for with every fiber of your being, what does it smell like? What does it taste like? What does it feel like? What does it feel like on your skin as you walk around? Okay, so we're going to turn on our time machine and we're going to travel together to that world. So if you keep your eyes closed and turn to your partner that you met earlier and take a couple of minutes to have a conversation with them. What did you see? What did you feel? What did you smell? How was that? Nice to see you. Okay, can I call you back again, please? Thank you. Could we bring the lights up again, please? Lovely backstage folks, thank you so much. So it would be really lovely to hear if any of you have any, just shout out any impressions that you had that you'd like to share. Anything you were surprised by? What did you see? What did you smell? Yes? Groups of people not looking at phones. Fantastic. So you connected to your inner child who had always wanted to do that. Beautiful. Thank you. Yes? A different quality of time that wasn't linear. Beautiful. We'll talk a bit more about that. Yes? Dappled light and shade. Didn't have to squint because there was dappled light and shade. Yes? No? No Excel sheets. I thought that's what you said, and I thought I wanted to double check. Yes? Gentleman there. Wild beavers in our wetlands. We'll come back to the beavers. We love the beavers. Yes? Oh, okay.
A gizmo. Oh, I didn't feel frightened anymore. I felt relaxed. There was lots of time, and I wasn't worrying about climate change.
Beautiful. Thank you. Gentleman here. You felt a powerful kindness. Community and responsibility for each other. Lady there.
Hello.
Hello.
My partner had some lovely things to say. People weren't anxious. They understood their place. They weren't worried about what's next. They were open and they felt safe and connected to nature.
Beautiful. Gorgeous. Thank you. Yes.
I was hearing voices all around me, and there were children running about and people bobbing in and out of like plants growing, and yeah, I just had this sensation of people and voices chatting.
Thank you. Gorgeous. Yes.
Lovely fresh fruits and vegetables just lining the streets. People were walking, helping themselves, and they didn't have to pay.
Beautiful. He said, lovely fresh fruit and vegetables lining the streets, and you didn't have to pay. You could. Yeah. Lady over there.
Bicycles and trains.
Bicycles and trains. Beautiful. Gentleman here. Hello. Swimming in the river. Wonderful. And the last one here, this gentleman here.
Children is learning outside, not in a room.
Learning outside and not in a room. Beautiful. Thank you. Thank you so much for doing that with me. I feel that this is, yeah, thank you. I feel like this is something we should do every day, that it should be a practice in the same way that running or meditation or yoga is, because the reality is that doing the opposite of this is a daily practice. Every morning we wake up, we turn on our phones and our phones say, God, everything's shit. Everything's only going to get worse. I'd stay in bed if I was you, really. And then we just get paralyzed. We're living in a time where the future is being cancelled, the future is being colonized, and that's profoundly, profoundly dangerous. So what I want to do is to tell you about a recent trip that we took to this 2030, myself and my colleague, Mr. Kit, in our time machine. So you might like to think of me as like the sort of Phineas Fogg or the Marco Polo of the climate movement, here to tell you a story of an amazing adventure. So we started our adventure on this street. You know this street. It's just around the corner from your place. You know, the third road down on the left. You know this place. And we set the time machine up there, set the controls for 2030. And when we stepped out onto that street, it now looked like this. Ooh. In just 5 years, we forget how quickly change can happen when there's energy behind it and momentum behind it. And the first impression was how much louder the birdsong was, then how much nicer the air smelled. Anyone here who's a sommelier would have a fantastic time in that future. You'd be picking out all different kinds of things that you could smell in that world. But the most important thing that we noticed was there was a look in people's eyes. There was a sense of, I think we might just do this. So you saw before our time traveler's costume. One of the things about those is that they have a special anti-cynicism coating, which means that when we get there, we reduce the risk of contaminating that future with any despondency or despair we might have brought with us from 2025. Because in 2030, they are on it, and things are changing really fast. If you turn and look the other way down that street, it looks like this. You can still see the infrastructure of where the cars used to be, where the different things used to be, but it's really, really changed. And the acoustics are so different as a result. And my friends, the bicycle rush hours of 2030 were a joy to see every morning, every evening, because we built the infrastructure and people used it, because we realized in 2025 that for every £1 million we spent building really, really good cycling infrastructure, we saved £38 million off the National Health Bill. It was not an expense. It was an investment in well-being, and we applied the same thing to food, to farming, to everything, this joined-up thinking that everything impacted everything. You might remember back in 2025, when you drove into the big cities and you saw these signs telling you how many car parking spaces there were. In 2030, we've now built so many places for people to store their bikes that we have these instead that tell you how many spaces there are. They're all in Dutch. Don't ask me why. I think something happened in 2027 that nobody wanted to talk to me about. But anyway, everyone still seemed quite happy, so it was fine. So all those underground car parks we don't need anymore were all repurposed as safe, clean, free places to leave your bicycle. Fantastic. And it reminded me of in 2023 when I went with my wife on holiday to Wales, and we saw this. We spent 10 minutes looking at this. And if any of you here are cyclists and can explain to me what on earth you're supposed to do with that. But it's not really, really? All we could think was you turn the bike upside down and glue it onto the pavement. It's not that useful, is it? Unless you have a cargo bike, yes. But my bike would be useless in that because it hasn't got a kickstand thing. So in the mid-2020s, we were building cycling infrastructure. A lot of it wasn't that great, if we're honest. But by 2030, every time you walk out of a train station, you see this, because we built it and people used it, because our municipalities, our governments moved with audacity and purpose and got on with it. And as we walked around, another thing we noticed was that new houses that are being built aren't built with concrete anymore, because we realized back in 2025 that 9% of all carbon emissions in the world were caused by our use of cement, and we were running out of sand, so we had to rethink. So we now build using more local materials. These buildings were built with straw and clay and lime and timber, and so farms surrounding cities have a whole new new area of enterprise, which is about growing construction materials, growing things needed to build affordable, ecological homes, much, much healthier to live in. And there's been an explosion in mycelium construction materials. We don't use gypsum plasterboard anymore. We use boards made using mycelium and waste materials. This has become a huge growth sector. And in many, many places that we went to, we saw this, where communities had mobilized, closed their streets to cars, taken that space back. In this place, people were very pleased to show us what this street used to look like back in 2025, if any of you can remember back that far, and now it looks like this. Again, these changes happened very fast, and as they changed, they built. And actually, people used to say in 2025, oh, I think it's too difficult. I don't think we should start on this journey because we don't have all the answers yet. Actually, what we found was when we set off, we found we were much more inventive and brilliant than we thought we were. And one of the sites that gave us the most hope was this. Many of the cities that we went to visit felt much softer, much more porous, much more absorbent, because we've removed at least 50% now of the concrete, the tarmac, the hard surfaces. As any of those of you who were in London a couple of days ago will attest, when you get above 30 degrees, this is dangerous stuff to live around. It holds so much heat. So what's become called the depaving industry grew very, very fast. Already in 2025, if you looked at Leuven in Belgium, they had a budget of 4 million euros every year for removing hard surfaces from the city as part of their climate impacts work. That grew very, very fast. We went to visit this school playground, which had recently been depaved. Back in 2025, it used to look like this. There were months when it was too hot. The kids couldn't even go out and play in it. It was too hot. In 2030, it's like this. We've taken away the hard surface. It's more porous. It absorbs the rainwater. Just fantastic. And but what happened? The way that this spread wasn't the government said, now you must do this, now you must do that. It grew as a sort of bottom-up challenge. You remember back in 2025, everybody, whether it was people, organizations, world governments, looked at each other and used each other's inaction to justify their own inaction. Why should we bother doing anything? Look at they're not doing anything. In 2030, that's completely flipped. It's like a race. It's a challenge. People want to do this ahead of everybody else. And this is now neighborhood by neighborhood. They challenge each other to see who can remove the most hard surfaces from their neighborhoods. And I brought you back, my friends, from 2030, the front page of Forbes magazine. See, you get so many treats with this session. And because in 2030, the culture is starting to change so fast. Young people now leave school with very different expectations of the work they want to go into. No one wants to work in fintech anymore, whatever that is. They want to work in depaving. They want to work in being a rooftop farmer. They want to be a seaweed farmer. They want to be imagination activists. The culture is profoundly moving to keep up with this transition that is happening in society. And one of the things that was so interesting being in 2030 was how they message this stuff. How do they communicate this stuff? How do we try and inspire people to get involved? And I've brought back for you a TV advert from the telly in 2030. Honestly, the gift that keeps on giving. It's all in Dutch again, sorry. But as you'll see, it doesn't really matter if you can understand Dutch. You'll understand this. But this is how they communicate depaving across the country now. And they use the same kind of model of how we now talk about renewable energy, urban agriculture, and so on. But this is just beautiful.
Een grensoverschrijdende competitie. Wie wint de gouden gieter?
Vlaanderen.
Oranje.
En we zijn begonnen. In deze steengoede wedstrijd wint Nederland tegen Vlaanderen. Wie wipt de meeste tegels en vervangt ze door groen? De eerste tegels vliegen eruit. En de plantjes gaan de grond in. Wip jij ook mee? Geef je gewipte tegels op van 21 maart tot en met 31 oktober via de website.
Isn't that gorgeous? Doesn't that feel a bit different from change your light bulbs and save the planet? So in this 2030, this is like a race. This is something everyone's really excited to be part of. We went to visit whole neighborhoods now where the cars are just being designed out of the fabric of those neighborhoods completely. And we went there thinking, well, we know what this will sound like. It'll sound like bicycles and children. Actually, when you go there, you realize that you can hear things that you can't normally hear without the background noise of the internal combustion engine. You can hear things like people having piano lessons in their houses. You can hear knives and forks on plates. It's a very, very different kind of a feeling. We went to visit this place, which is a school designed by the kids, with an architect, obviously. But education is very, very different in 2030. Testing was abolished in schools in 2027, and education is much more about imagination and creativity and the skills you actually need in this world you're going out into. And it turns out that when you ask kids to design their own school, they say it should have a rainforest in the middle. And so I'm very pleased to tell you that by 2030, 60% of UK schools have now met their targets of having a rainforest in the middle, which has led to huge improvements for mental health for young people. And now, although we still have erratic rains and heavy rain, we don't see flooding so much now because we've developed the humility to recognize that beavers are much better hydrological engineers than human beings could ever possibly be. And those upland areas where that rainwater came from, we've handed them back to the beavers, and they've created these landscapes that trap huge amounts of water and silt and explode the biodiversity, and it's like going to a really nice version of Jurassic Park. Like it feels like there's something different there, but we've really built that humility. And agriculture really changed as well. Rather than saying, well, you know, all the other sectors should move before us, agriculture took off and took the lead and really began to move very, very quickly. As we walked around in rural areas, we saw a lot more agroforestry, a lot more ground cover. People eat less meat, but it was a change that nobody really noticed. It just sort of happened. And so, and storing a lot more carbon into the soils, but also food growing became something that was much more a part of life wherever you were. This is a university we went to visit, where they now grow food around the university. When young people are checking the league tables to see which university they want to go to, there's now a column in those league tables about how much food is grown on that campus. And that's one of the key reasons that kids choose to go to those places. This place, there's no lawn left around it anymore. It's just surrounded by food gardens. We went to visit this urban market garden, 1 hectare, surrounded by apartments. They employ 2 people. They grow £180,000 worth of produce on here, sold direct to local people. And you see the same everywhere you go. This changed really fast. And the systems changed to go with that. This is a town that we went to visit while we were in 2030. Where the school meals are 100% organic and 80% of them are grown in the town. The municipality bought land to grow the food in the town, and the kids from the school come out and they're part of it, and the food is cooked fresh in the school. An amazing, amazing shift that happened. But what was most interesting about it was that after the municipality made this shift with audacity, with boldness, we're going to do this. They did it. 5 years after it happened, they did a whole load of research in the town. They found that people ate 30% less ultra-processed food, 23% less meat, more organic local food, because that shift had happened and it had filtered through the kids into the wider community. So we built these new structures. Some of them were already there in 2025 if you knew where to look. This is the city of Liège in Belgium, where in 2014, the transition group, Liège en Transition, had this conversation with this what-if question. They said, what if, in a generation's time, the majority of the food eaten in Liège came from the land closest to Liège? Such a beautiful question. By 2018, they had raised €5 million of investment, not from the bank, not from the municipality, from the people of Liège, investing into 30 new cooperatives. I met the guy who had started a cooperative vineyard and raised €2.5 million. I said, how did you do that? Like, what made you think that would work? And he gave me this lovely Belgian shrug and said, it's Belgium. People like wine. People have some money. Don't be afraid. So he always passed that advice on to people. He said, we had a great story, and people wanted to see that story realized. By 2025, this model is now supported by the municipality. They produce 3,500 school meals every day. They have a food logistics hub on the edge of the town. This model has spread to 6 other cities in Belgium. By 2030, this is the new normal. Every city is building a food belt. Why would you not build a food belt? Sodexo went out of business in 2027 because we didn't need them anymore. And one of the things that I loved, I remember reading back in 2025, was that there was a survey that said that more than just almost 50% of young people said they would rather live without the internet. And that built into a movement very quickly, a movement of young people seeking real experiences, real connections. And as you walked around the streets, you started to see that. They started to use the word family, not as a noun, but as a verb. And you started to see these events of people coming together to celebrate together, to eat together. It was beautiful to see as we walked around. And of course, I'm delighted to tell you that by 2030, Britain has met its targets in terms of renewable energy. But the beautiful thing is that more than half of that is in community ownership. So the benefits stay in communities. We're all involved with making that happen. Actually, you know, having been there to visit this 2030 that I've just told you about, it always makes me feel really emotional to be able to stand and tell you about it. It's extraordinary. We did it. You did it. It was an amazing, amazing thing. So I'm just going to take a step back for a moment to 2025. As William Gibson, the science fiction writer, said, the future's already here, it's just not evenly distributed. All those stories that I've told you from our trip to 2030, you can already find them. You can go and see them tomorrow. We started our journey in Amsterdam, we went to Barcelona, we went to Utrecht in Holland, we went to Leeds, we went to Brixton, we went to Cornwall, we went to Belgium, etc., etc. We live in a time where there's so much money thrown at innovation. We need better tech. We need better tech. We don't need better tech. We know how to do all this stuff because it already works somewhere. What we're missing is the social tech, is the cultivation of longing. How do we do that at scale? As the writer Don DeLillo said, longing on a large scale is what makes history. I'm going to say that again because it's really important. Longing on a large scale is what makes history. So how do we do longing at scale? That's what I want to talk about just in this last little bit. So a couple of years ago, I saw a T-shirt a young woman was wearing at a Black Lives Matter protest in Washington, and it said, "I've been to the future, we won." And it gave me goosebumps. And it profoundly changed the way I thought about the climate activism that I was doing. How do we, maybe a better way to mobilize and inspire people is like that. And so I've been working for the last couple of years with an English and French film crew of young people who've been making a film about my time traveling leanings. What did I say? And they've made a little trailer which just gives you a taste of the kind of journey that I've been on with this work. So here, this is it.
So I want to kind of go back a bit. When did you start telling people you were a time traveller?
You sound like my psychotherapist. There's so much in the narratives, I think, particularly within the environmental movement, where we talk about the time that we're in as being the end. When you think about the future, how do you feel about the future?
Probably fairly pessimistic, really.
If we imagine we're going to make change on the scale we need to by just talking about extinction and collapse all the time, I think we're kind of missing a trick and we're doing something wrong.
So it's true that at the moment the future looks like a very bleak and difficult and horrible place. But in our time machine, we've built it to explore different possible futures that aren't utopias, aren't dystopias, but are the future that resulted from us doing absolutely everything we could possibly have done during these next 10 years. What would that be?
When you help people to time travel to the future in a way that feels exciting and they attach emotion to it, that imagining of the future becomes a memory. You create a memory of the future. We have turned this room into a time portal. I think when we step out of our time machine back into 2024, you look at the time that we're in now as the beginning of this great renaissance that happened. Well, we're at Boomtown Festival. I'm here because they've asked me to go and speak to about 10,000 people. It's looking like we only got one solution.
Warm round of applause for Mr. Robert Hopkins.
Power to the imagination.
Thank you, thank you. So I want to just tell you a few things that I see that might actually shape what our activism might look like. How did we start doing the stuff that we do differently in 2025 that created that 2030? Because what we were doing in 2025 before wasn't going to do that. So we changed how we were doing the things that we did. So one thing is we became better at creating what I call pop-up tomorrows. This, some of you may remember, this is April 2019, the first Extinction Rebellion, Waterloo Bridge. Extinction Rebellion closed that bridge for 8 days, took hundreds of arrests to protect it. Some of them were my wife being arrested twice, very proud of her. And they turned that bridge for 8 days into a forest. And I call this a pop-up tomorrow. They took the future that you dreamt of when you closed your eyes in 2030, and they brought it into 2023, whenever it was, 2019, sorry, and they put it there so people could interact with it and smell it and touch it and feel it. And I've met 5 people who've come up to me after talks when I've shown this, maybe there'll be more today, who've said, I had the experience when that was like that, of stopping on that bridge and going, oh, why can't it always be like this? And gave up their jobs as a result of that, and now work in climate and sustainability. Last week I showed this, a woman said, yeah, we profoundly changed the way my legal practice worked after having that experience. Creating pop-up tomorrows is really powerful and really important. And it leads me also to reflect that this idea of activism as a way of creating longing, climate scientists aren't terrible at creating longing. Climate activists, we're not great at it either. The people who are good at doing it are the poets, the storytellers, the songwriters, the storytellers. We can't do this without those people. We really need a sort of a mass movement, I think, of longing creation. And when I started looking around the world for the new book that I've written, which is called How to Fall in Love with the Future, and there are some copies at the back, and I'm very happy to sign them afterwards, I found some amazing activists doing work that plays with time in really interesting ways. So much of our activist culture gets rooted in the present. When do we want it? Now. No one ever says, when do we want it? In about 280 years, 36 years ago. It's always very much in the present, but there are activists playing with time in really interesting ways. These 2 amazing women, Rashida Phillips and an artist called Moormother, run a project called Black Quantum Futurism in Philadelphia, where they bring together futurism, like Afrofuturist stuff, with black politics and black history, with quantum physics. And they talk about time travel in a way that's completely serious. And the way they work with it is just beautiful. In their neighborhood, which is being gentrified, they took over an empty cafe and turned it into what they called a community futures lab, where they collected people's oral futures. I love that. Oral futures. This is an amazing artist in Canada called Camille Turner, who we all know that in the United States, long, horrific history of slavery. Canada tells a different story about itself. They were the nice place. They were the safe place people could run to escape from slavery. Wasn't quite like that. There was a very active slave trade in Canada, particularly on the East Coast. And so she did a whole load of archive research and found things like, this is an advert for someone offering a reward because their slave has managed to escape. This is an auction for slaves. Inventories of ships. One whole ship came over from the west coast of Africa with a cargo entirely of children. And she has all of this documented here. This project is called Afronautic Research Labs. So people come into a room, all this material is on the table, laminated like this, for them to read and learn. That's a great thing on its own, right? But the Afronautic bit is really interesting. So when you come into the room, there are 2 people of color standing at the back in ceremonial robes. They never speak. They're there to bear witness. The narrative is that so important is this moment in history of people coming to really understand what happened during the Mid-Atlantic slave trade, that they have traveled back from the future to bear witness to this moment. I love this idea that we start to play with time in the activism that we do, what I call temporal fluidity. So we move to the future to help us understand the past, back to the future again. We give people experiences of moving through time in that way. I think it's just beautiful. This is one of the... Does anybody know who this is? Sun Ra, fantastic. This is the great Sun Ra, which if this talk inspires you to do nothing else than go home and look up Sun Ra on YouTube, then my work time will have been well spent. So Sun Ra was an amazing jazz musician in the 50s, 60s, 70s, 80s. He told an amazing story about himself. He said, I'm not a human being, I'm an angel from Saturn. And with his band, they traveled through space, And they always dressed like this. This is Sun Ra himself, but I read a review of his band from the 80s that said they looked like a nativity play where everyone had decided to come as the three kings. And they all lived in a house together, and they would dress like this to pop round the corner to buy milk or to go to the laundrette. And I read an article about them recently that described them as everyday utopians. This was not like a stage get-up. This was who they were. I've interviewed people who knew Sun Ra, and I said, do you really believe he was from Saturn? They said, yeah, of course he was. And there's a beautiful quote by Sun Ra. He said, the future is obvious, but the potential impossible is calling softly and knocking gently. Which is just gorgeous. And Sun Ra lived in Philadelphia. He died there in 1993. Philadelphia is a place where there's large neighborhoods, poor neighborhoods, mostly people of color, with very low tree cover. And so there's an organization there called Streetwork who are trying to promote the planting of trees in these neighborhoods. They put on an event in Philadelphia, in the Arboretum there, and they invited Sun Ra's orchestra, who still play, some of them over 100, and they still play that extraordinary music. And this event was called Summoning the Future Forest. Summoning the Future Forest. I thought it was beautiful. It's like saying, just over there is that incredible future forest of Philadelphia. If we can create an event that's powerful enough and magical enough and delicious enough, maybe it might just act to summon that future through into the present. I think we need to get much better at summoning things in that way. Since I wrote this book, How to Fall in Love with the Future, I get all sorts of very strange people sending me emails of time machines that they have built. There are some very eccentric people out there. The beautiful thing about time travel is that anything can be a time machine. If I say, this water bottle is a time machine, people don't say to me, Rob, come on now. Explain to me the quantum mechanics of that. They say, oh, cool, where are we going? So there's a real playfulness to it. So this is one that somebody sent. This is one I was sent the other day. And this is another one. I don't know what the phone on the side is for. I don't know if it allows you to ring to the future. I don't know quite what it is. But there's this flourishing of people starting to incorporate this idea of temporal fluidity into what they do. I was recently on a Zoom, on a podcast with the head teacher on an island in British Columbia. And we talked about time travel and time machines and things. And then a few months later, he got back to me and said, Rob, after that conversation, we completely redesigned the whole last year of the curriculum in our school, so the students spent the whole year in 2040. Rather than talking about what should 2040 be like, they went there for a whole year, and they figured it all out. And then at the end of the year, they invited their whole community to come to the biggest hall in their town. They had to walk in through this time tunnel that you can see up there in the top right-hand corner. There was an art exhibition from the future. There was food from the future. There were even leaflets they had made from the organizations that had made that transition possible, including a new ministry for public beauty that was founded in 2026. He said it was a profoundly different experience for the kids, and for them to be able to then show the rest of the community the future they'd been to was something that they really, really were impacted by. But this idea of building time machines as a way of unlocking change is also starting to spread into local authorities in this country here. This is Banw Brycheiniog National Park. Apologies to any native Welsh speakers. This used to be called the Brecon Beacons National Park. Every few years, they have to write their management plan for the national park, usually quite boring, dry documents. They wrote this amazing document full of pictures from the future, photos from the future, and so on and so on. And then a few months later, I gave a talk where I was talking about time travel and time machines. And a few months after that, the two women who'd written this wrote to me and said, Rob, we've built a time machine. I said, what do you mean you've built a time machine? They said, well, we got back to the office and we found that actually, as a municipality, we had bought a mobile planetarium 5 years ago. I think because there were like grants for mobile planetariums, you know. And they bought this thing and they didn't really know what to do with it. So they turned it into a time machine. So they made these films with them in black and white, cut in with archive footage of food production in the national park in the 1940s. And then they made a film about the present, what's happening with food production at the moment in the national park. And then they work with the kids in the schools who come in and they make the videos from the future. And then they invite the decision makers to come in and go on this journey through the past, present, and future. They are now massive, passionate advocates for local authorities across this country building time travel devices. It's beautiful. And I'm always looking out for these activities that allow us to give people an experience where at the end they can say, when I was in the future. It's one of the most profoundly precious things we can do for people right now, I think. This is an activity developed by my friend Ruth Ben-Tovim called Town Anywhere, a beautiful activity where you take between 40 and 400 people through an exercise where you imagine you're going to the future, and then you literally build that world with cardboard and bamboo and sticky tape and string. You inhabit it for 3 hours. You trade in it, you dance in it, you celebrate in it, you grieve in it. And it's amazing to be in a world, she calls it rehearsing the future. Gives people the opportunity to rehearse the future. It's an absolutely beautiful thing. If it happens anywhere near you, go and do it. And I was inspired a while ago by a young woman in Berlin called Wasima Labic, who developed what she calls sensual futuring. That this is not just about what that future looks like. What does it smell like? What does it feel like? And this is an activity that I do on longer courses, which is called Making Sense of the Future, SCENTS. Where I give people a paper cup and I say, you 15 minutes, go outside, go to the garden, go to the kitchen, wherever. I want you to make a cocktail of smells that smells like that future that you long for. The poet Rilke once said, the future must enter into you a long time before it happens. And using smell makes that possible. By the time you've been around the room and smelt 30 of these different smells, something starts to get into your bones, into your DNA. So in my own work, in my own practice, this is myself and Mr. Kit again, we have doing a project called Field Recordings from the Future, where I've been to visit places across Europe that already sound like that future needs to sound like, and I make recordings there, and then Mr. Kit turns them into these beautiful ambient pieces of music. We've made videos that go with each one, and then we do this, we create time portals where we build a structure and project those films all around people. I also want to show you a little 1-minute film of when we recently did it. This is what it looks like when we start building time machines at scale, I think.
Welcome to Field Recordings from the Future. To your future.
God will glorify biodiversity. There's nothing else like it.
Mushroom farms, extraordinary, otherworldly places.
And when you see the little mushrooms growing up, it's really satisfying.
People are no longer defined by their postcodes, and there are no areas of deprivation.
Such incredible cycling infrastructure, so many people.
I take a deep breath and inhale crisp, clean, fresh air. This is home, and it's just gorgeous, just gorgeous.
So next year we're going to be doing a tour of that around the UK, so look out for that. And we're also starting to do a comic book, which is the story about how we went to 2030 and collected all those recordings, because we feel like, well, maybe if Elon Musk and Jeff Bezos had grown up reading comic books about beavers and mushrooms and bicycles rather than books about going to Mars, that the world might be looking a little bit different right now. And just to finish off, my friend Tony, who's here, who's an engineer supreme, who has built this delightful device for us, which had its first public outing last week in London, which is our Predict Your Future machine. And it'll be something at all of our events where you press the button and it prints out a future that it is transmitted back from 2030. So this is how it works. You go up and you press the button, and then it then prints you out your future that comes from the future. So this one says, after years of campaigning, you finally see beavers in your local river. Their dams have created a vibrant ecosystem, and you couldn't be prouder of your community's efforts. I think we need more and more and more things like this so that we can help people to fall in love with the future. And just before I finish, I want to just leave you with a story, which was that I was in a place in France called Pontivy last year, and I gave a talk, and at the end, the first person put their hand up and they said, you know, the last time I was in this room was a year ago, and it was for a talk by a woman who was the last surviving member of the French resistance. She was 95, she was in the French resistance as a teenager. And she said, somebody asked her, was there anything that all the people you knew in the French resistance had in common? And she thought about it for a while and she said, yeah, they were all optimists. When you need optimists, you really, really need optimists. And we really, really need them now. And we need our activism to be designed, our change-making to be designed in a way that it nurtures and cultivates optimists. Thank you so much for being here. Thank you. Thank you. You're very kind. We have just a couple of minutes for questions. I mean, maybe if we take a couple of questions. Sorry, I went on a bit too long and we're a little bit over. Yes, there's a gentleman here, and then maybe one more.
So I've been to 2030, and the 2030 Nobel Prize for the actualization of the future through imagination goes to Rob Hopkins.
Thank you. No, he's definitely human. Anybody else? Yes, gentleman at the back there. Middle of the back. Bit back of him. Yes.
Hi, Rob. I did your transition training 20 years ago, and it's changed my life and the way forward, but in thinking about things. When will the centralized food system collapse in the next 5 years? We all need to be on it.
Yes. When will it come? That's a very, yes. We'll see. I have bought some very lovely, very limited, lovely bookmarks that go with books as well, which I can do at the back. If you want, just to say, if you want to find out more about what I do, there's some things on here, including I do a newsletter that goes out every month, which is called the Time Traveler's Gazette, which is full of different things that I've been doing and different things that I've been seeing. And there's some other things on there. Is there one last question before we close? We've got a couple of minutes left. Yes.
Rob, I just wanted to know if you could choose one thing, what would be the one thing that you're most excited about for 2030?
Say that again. Sorry.
What is the one thing you're most excited about 2030?
The one thing I'm most excited about in 2030? Thank you. I think one of the things that most took me by surprise when I went there recently was that by 2030 in the cities, there's such a vibrant and creative use of rooftop spaces. The sort of rooftop farming scene. Now being a rooftop gardener is a cooler thing than being a rapper. It's like the coolest thing. The people who grow food on the rooftops, the salads and stuff on the roofs, amazing. And now there's so much of it that municipalities have started to build walkways between buildings. So there's places where you can take your bicycle up in the lift, and then you can cycle around on these walkways and visit these different market gardens and little rooftop spaces. So there's the city you see when you walk around, but then there's another whole city going on up there when you go up top. That's very exciting. Yeah, and the city centre beavers are wonderful as well. Yeah. Yes, gentlemen.
Rob, you mentioned the moon dancing of the 1920s after Jules Verne. What would the dancing look like?
I thought you were going to ask me to do some moon dance. No, I can't. That's not going to happen. What would the dances look like? Goodness gracious me. I don't know, but I will have a think about that. And the next talk you come to, I'll have got that figured out. We're out of time. Thank you so much for coming. Enjoy the rest of your festival.